The Galactic Empire, confident in its dominance, approached the human race with the same arrogance that had subjugated countless other civilizations. Humanity, they believed, was a timid, peace-loving species. Their emissaries had seen Earth's diplomats in action, apologetic, cooperative, eager to avoid conflict. Reports described humans as inventive but inherently fearful, unwilling to take bold risks in the face of adversity. In the eyes of the Empire, humanity posed no significant threat, just another species to add to their vast collection of vassals. The annexation of Outpost Gamma was meant to be a routine operation, a mere formality. Positioned at the edge of the Empire's expanding border, the outpost was little more than a blip on their radar. Empire scouts reported minimal defenses and no signs of resistance. A swift strike would suffice to assert control. Grand Admiral Varkesh, an imposing figure in the Empire's fleet, declared confidently, "These humans will surrender before the first shot is fired. Their kind always does." The Empire's fleet descended upon Outpost Gamma with an overwhelming show of force. Massive warships blocked out the stars as they hovered over the outpost, their shadows stretching across the planet's surface. A single transmission was sent to the human station. "Surrender, and you will be spared." There was no immediate reply. Varkesh smirked, interpreting the silence as hesitation. "Weaklings," he muttered. Finally, a response came. It was brief, almost curt. "This is a joint station under United Nations jurisdiction. Your actions will not go unanswered." Varkesh laughed at the audacity of the message. He turned to his officers and declared, "It seems these humans have learned to bark. Let us remind them they lack the teeth to bite." The takeover was swift. The outpost defenses, what little existed, were disabled in moments. Imperial troops stormed the facility, encountering no resistance. The humans stationed there appeared bewildered, scrambling to protect equipment rather than themselves. Within hours, the Empire had complete control. Varkesh stood aboard his command ship, observing the operation with satisfaction. To him, this was proof of humanity's cowardice. But something felt off. As Empire engineers began dismantling the station's systems, they found themselves puzzled by the design of the fortifications. They were sturdy, far more so than necessary for an outpost of this size. There were dormant weapon systems buried deep within the facility, their activation sequences complex and encrypted. One of the engineers reported, "Admiral, this station was built to withstand an invasion far greater than ours. Why it wasn't used I can't say." Varkesh dismissed the concern with a wave of his hand. "A relic of human paranoia. They overprepare but lack the courage to act. Focus on extracting what's useful and leave the rest." However, back on Earth, the reaction to the Empire's aggression was anything but timid. Within hours, the United Nations convened an emergency session, but the true power broker in the room was the United States representative. With cold determination, they argued that this was not just an attack on humanity but a direct assault on their sovereignty. "The Empire has underestimated us," the representative declared. "They've mistaken diplomacy for weakness. Let's show them their mistake." In a secure military facility, high-ranking American officials reviewed the situation. Outpost Gamma wasn't just a research station, it was a strategic foothold designed for contingency operations. Its capture by the Empire was an act of war. The President, after a brief but tense discussion, authorized a classified response protocol. A general, stoic and unflinching, relayed the order. "Activate Protocol Leviathan." What happened next would redefine the galaxy's understanding of humanity. The Empire's fleet barely had time to celebrate their victory at Outpost Gamma before their systems began to falter. It started with minor disruptions, communication channels crackling with static, navigation systems recalibrating unexpectedly, but quickly escalated. Within hours, critical systems aboard their ships were failing. Lights flickered, shields went offline, and the once imposing fleet was suddenly vulnerable. The attack came without warning. Stealth bombers, invisible to Empire sensors, unleashed electromagnetic pulses across the fleet, crippling their advanced technology. Ships designed to withstand direct energy weapons were helpless against this primitive yet devastating assault. Empire commanders scrambled for answers, only to find their data systems flooded with nonsensical messages. One officer reported to Varkesh, "Admiral, they're bypassing our firewalls with ancient coding languages. Our systems don't even recognize these protocols." The Americans had struck with precision. Their outdated technology, considered obsolete by the Empire, became an unexpected advantage. The Empire's reliance on hyper-advanced systems left them blind to the simpler methods humans employed. While the fleet struggled to regain control, American forces moved in. Compact, heavily armed vessels maneuvered with agility, targeting weak points in the Empire's formation. The Empire's soldiers, trained for conventional warfare, were unprepared for what followed. American troops utilized guerrilla tactics, appearing and disappearing with alarming speed. Their armor was crude by Empire standards, yet it absorbed damage effectively. Worse, the Americans fought with a ferocity the Empire had never encountered. Every skirmish turned into a lesson in chaos, as human soldiers adapted on the fly, exploiting every weakness they could find. Psychological warfare became a weapon in itself. Empire troops reported hearing strange, haunting music broadcast across their channels. The melodies were accompanied by booming, incomprehensible voices that seemed to taunt them. It wasn't long before the Empire learned these were human war songs, meant to unnerve and demoralize. The lyrics, filled with defiance and resilience, resonated even through translation barriers. To the Empire, they were anthems of a species that refused to submit. American commanders, aware of the cultural gap, used it to their advantage. Orders were transmitted using idioms and slang, knowing they would confuse the Empire's interceptors. When an American officer declared, "Give them hell," the phrase was taken literally, sparking rumors among Empire ranks of humans wielding supernatural forces. The phrase, "Bring the fireworks," led Empire commanders to believe an elaborate celebration was imminent, only to be met with a barrage of missile strikes. Varkesh was livid. For every tactical maneuver he attempted, the Americans countered with something he could neither predict nor comprehend. Their strategies defied logic, relying on unpredictability and audacity. He refused to believe that such a chaotic approach could yield success, yet his fleet's losses mounted. What was meant to be a swift conquest had turned into a desperate fight for survival. The Americans didn't just aim to defeat the Empire, they sought to humiliate them. False transmissions lured Empire forces into ambushes. Captured soldiers were treated humanely, their images broadcast back to their home worlds as proof of human mercy, a stark contrast to the Empire's brutal reputation. The propaganda war was as decisive as the physical battles. Civilians across the Empire began to question their leadership. If these cowards could stand against the mighty fleet, what else had they been lied to about? For Varkesh, the realization was slow and bitter. His opponent wasn't just another subjugated race. These humans, specifically the Americans, were unlike anything the Empire had encountered. They fought not for conquest or dominance but with an almost personal vendetta, as though the Empire had awakened a sleeping beast. And Varkesh knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. The tide of war shifted decisively as the Americans executed their next move with surgical precision. A covert strike team, composed of operatives trained for deep infiltration, penetrated the heart of the Empire's territory. Their target, a critical command hub buried within one of the Empire's most secure planets. The facility, thought to be impenetrable, relied on sophisticated defensive systems that operated under the assumption that no primitive technology could bypass their safeguards. But it wasn't advanced tech that the Americans brought with them. Instead, they relied on obsolete methods, mechanical tools, analog systems, and untraceable communications. Empire sensors, designed to detect quantum-level threats, failed to register the Americans' approach. By the time the infiltrators were detected, it was too late. Key systems within the facility were compromised, control was wrested away from the Empire, and a massive data breach exposed classified information to the Americans. The strike wasn't just a physical blow, it was psychological. The data extracted from the facility revealed deep-seated corruption within the Empire's leadership, which the Americans wasted no time exploiting. Videos of luxury and excess enjoyed by Empire officials, juxtaposed with the hardships endured by their citizens, were broadcast across the Empire's networks. The propaganda was undeniable, sparking outrage among the Empire's population. Empire leadership scrambled to maintain order. Varkesh, already stretched thin by the mounting losses, found himself in an impossible position. Not only were his forces suffering defeat after defeat, but the very citizens he fought to protect were turning against him. Protests erupted on core worlds, demanding accountability for the Empire's failure to contain what they now called the human scourge. Whispers of rebellion spread, weakening the Empire's resolve from within. Meanwhile, the Americans escalated their offensive. Instead of focusing solely on military victories, they began targeting the Empire's logistics and supply lines. Using guerrilla tactics, they disrupted critical trade routes, sabotaged infrastructure, and rendered key resources inaccessible. Empire fleets found themselves stranded, unable to resupply or retreat. The Americans didn't just want to win, they wanted to ensure the Empire could never mount a counteroffensive. Among the chaos, one individual stood as a stark contrast to the Americans' ruthless approach: Liam Carter, a diplomat sent to mediate between the broader human coalition and the Americans. Carter understood the need for a strong response but worried that unchecked aggression could lead to unnecessary destruction. His presence became a calming influence, urging restraint where others sought escalation. Carter's interactions with Varkesh were both tense and revealing. The two men, each representing vastly different ideologies, found themselves at a crossroads. Varkesh, driven by pride and duty, couldn't comprehend humanity's duality, the ability to show mercy even in the face of total victory. Carter, in turn, saw the cracks in Varkesh's resolve and pressed him to consider an alternative to endless conflict. But while Carter sought diplomacy, the Americans pushed forward with unrelenting determination. Their strategy was clear: dismantle the Empire's ability to wage war, leaving them no choice but to capitulate. This approach culminated in a decisive operation, a coordinated assault on one of the Empire's most fortified planets. The attack was meticulously planned, combining brute force with psychological warfare to break the Empire's will. As the operation unfolded, it became clear that the Americans were not just fighting for survival, they were making a statement. The message was unmistakable: humanity was not to be underestimated. Varkesh, watching the devastation unfold, could only marvel at the humans' adaptability. What he once dismissed as chaos was, in truth, a masterclass in strategy, executed with precision and purpose. The Empire was now at a breaking point. Its fleets were scattered, its leadership discredited, and its citizens disillusioned. The once mighty superpower had been brought to its knees, not by an equal force, but by a species it had arrogantly deemed inferior. And as Varkesh stared at the reports of yet another defeat, he began to understand the true cost of underestimating humanity. The final confrontation began with an ominous silence. The Empire's capital planet, long regarded as an impenetrable stronghold, braced itself for the impending assault. The Americans, having dismantled the Empire's outer defenses and destabilized its infrastructure, were ready for their climactic move. Every remaining fleet, every resource, and every ounce of Varkesh's pride were now concentrated on this one last stand. Defeat here would mean the collapse of the Empire, but victory felt like an impossibility. The American forces approached with the same unrelenting precision that had defined their campaign. Their strategy was twofold: overwhelm the Empire's military might and destroy their psychological resilience. Orbital bombardments targeted key installations, not with the intent of maximizing destruction but to create chaos. Empire defenses fired frantically into the void, hitting nothing as the Americans maneuvered with agility and precision. Each strike seemed calculated to humiliate rather than annihilate. Meanwhile, on the ground, misinformation spread like wildfire. The Empire's citizens, already disillusioned, found their communication networks flooded with propaganda that portrayed the Americans not as conquerors, but as liberators. The truth was irrelevant. What mattered was the perception. Carefully edited footage showed Empire soldiers surrendering without a fight, local leaders collaborating with human forces, and civilians welcoming their supposed saviors. Every piece of content chipped away at the Empire's authority. Inside the Empire's War Council, panic set in. Varkesh, once composed and commanding, was now a shadow of his former self. His advisors bickered over strategies, each more desperate than the last. One suggested deploying the planet's entire energy reserve into a superweapon, even if it meant risking civilian casualties. Another advocated for surrender, a word that had never before been spoken in the halls of power. Varkesh silenced them all, his voice trembling with frustration and resignation. "We are the Empire," he declared, though the words felt hollow. "We do not yield." The Americans, however, were not simply waging war, they were dismantling the very foundations of the Empire's identity. Their final tactic was one of unprecedented audacity. Using the data they had acquired during the earlier infiltration, they hacked into the Empire's most secure broadcast network. Across every screen, in every home and public square, a single image appeared, Varkesh's face, juxtaposed with the devastation of his fleet and the suffering of his people. A voice, calm yet commanding, narrated his failures. "This is not the strength of an empire," it declared. "This is the cost of arrogance." The broadcast ended with a stark message: surrender was the only path to survival. For the first time in its history, the Empire's citizens openly called for peace. Protests erupted in the capital, with civilians demanding an end to the conflict. Soldiers, demoralized and outmaneuvered, abandoned their posts. The once mighty Empire was fracturing, not from the outside, but from within. Varkesh stood alone in his command chamber, staring at the reports of rebellion and defeat. When the final ultimatum arrived, delivered not by a fleet, but by a single human diplomat, he knew there was no alternative. Liam Carter, representing the broader human coalition, approached with an air of quiet determination. His words were firm but devoid of malice. "This doesn't have to end in destruction," he said. "But it will, if you continue down this path." Defeated, Varkesh relented. The Empire's surrender was formalized in a treaty that acknowledged humanity's sovereignty and established new terms for interstellar relations. The Americans, true to their word, did not demand conquest or subjugation. They sought only security and respect, a stark contrast to the Empire's own history of expansionism. In the aftermath, the galaxy reevaluated its perception of humanity. No longer seen as timid or harmless, they were now recognized as a force capable of immense power and unyielding resolve. And while the Americans' ruthlessness became the stuff of legends, the broader message was clear: humanity, when provoked, was not to be underestimated. Varkesh, in his final report to the remnants of the Empire's leadership, captured the lesson learned with chilling clarity. "They are not like us. They do not seek domination, but their capacity for destruction is unparalleled. Humanity fights not to conquer, but to survive, and when survival is at stake, there is no force in the galaxy that can stand against them." As the treaty was signed and the Americans began their withdrawal, one final broadcast echoed across the stars. Its message was simple yet profound, a warning to any who might underestimate the species again. "Humans are not afraid of war. But if you push them to fight, you will regret it."